Well, this is where we take, the whole stack of sources, FBI files, forensic reports, everything, and really get into the details of the world's most fascinating, unsolved mysteries.
And today,
Oh,
oh
boy.
boy, we are diving into a case that's just pure legend. Audacity defined, really. D.B. Cooper,
Right.
the only person in history to pull off an unsolved air piracy job on a commercial flight.
Mm-hmm.
Grabbed a fortune, jumped out of a plane, and just gone. Vanished into the Pacific Northwest night.
It sounds like something straight out of a movie, doesn't it? The guy in the suit orders a bourbon, demands cash and parachutes, then jumps from a Boeing 727, but it actually happened.
It did. And our sources for this are pretty deep. We're talking the massive 66-volume FBI case file, the Honor Jack case, they called it.
Yeah.
Plus, decades of forensic work, even some recent stuff from citizen investigators finding microscopic clues. It's quite a rabbit hole.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to get past the Hollywood version. We're going to dig into the nitty-gritty of the crime itself, look hard at the physical evidence, which is baffling, frankly, and see if we can connect those dots. The science, the profiles, the theories about who he was, what happened to him.
Yeah, not just what happened, but who could pull this off and how.
Okay, let's start with the name itself. D.B. Cooper. It's everywhere. Bars, books, you name it. But that wasn't actually his name, was it?
No, that's one of the first layers of weirdness. He bought the ticket under the alias Dan Cooper. Just Dan.
So where did the DB come from?
That was a reporter's mistake, actually. A guy named James Long, covering the story early on, misheard or miswrote it as D.B. Cooper.
Huh.
And United Press International, UPI, picked it up and sent it out on the wire service worldwide. Before the FBI could even blink and correct it, D.B. Cooper was the name. It just stuck.
Wow. So the legend starts with a typo, basically. Fitting for such a mysterious figure.
Kind of perfect, yeah.
Yeah.
Accidental mystique from the get-go.
Okay, let's rewind. Let's set the scene. When does this all kick off?
So picture this. It's Thanksgiving Eve, November 24th, 1971. People are thinking about turkey, travel, family.
Right, holiday rush.
Exactly. And Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 is just doing its regular short hop.
Oh.
A quick 30-minute flight from Portland, Oregon up to Seattle, Washington. A real puddle jumper, Should have been totally routine.
But then Dan Cooper gets on board. What did he look like? Did he stand out?
That's the thing, he didn't stand out. He looked completely ordinary. Eyewitnesses described him as a white guy, maybe mid-40s, dark hair, brown eyes.
Okay.
Wearing a business suit, black, or maybe dark brown with a thin black tie, a black raincoat, dark shoes. Looked like any other businessman flying that route.
Mm-hmm.
Paid cash for his one-way ticket. Blended right in.
And he orders a drink.
Yeah, just one. He sits down on the back seat, 18E, and orders a bourbon and 7-Up. That's the only drink he had the entire time.
Interesting. Keeping a clear head.
Totally focused. Meticulous. And then, shortly after they take off from Portland, he makes his move. He calls over the flight attendant, Florence Schaffner. She was sitting in the jump seat right near him. He just hands her a folded note.
And she probably thought...
Yeah, she thought it was just some lonely businessman trying to give her his number. Happens all the time, right? So she just slipped it into her purse, didn't even look at it.
But Cooper wasn't having that.
Nope. He leans closer and says, very quietly, something like, "Miss, you better look at that note. I have a bomb."
Chilling, just like that.
Just like that. So she opens it. The note was neatly printed, all caps, with a felt tip pen. Laid out his demands.
And the bomb? Did she see it?
He gave her a glimpse. Opened his briefcase just enough for her to see inside. She described seeing 2 rows of 4 red cylinders, wires, and a big battery. Looked like a bomb.
Could it have been fake?
The FBI later thought maybe they were just flares, something like that. But in that moment, on that plane, it didn't matter. The threat was real. Everyone had to assume it was a live bomb.
Okay, so what were the demands, besides the obvious implication of the bomb?
He wanted 2 things, very specific. First, $200,000 in negotiable American currency.
Which was a ton of money in 71.
Oh, yeah, massive, like over $1.5 million in today's money. Huge sum. And he wanted it delivered in a knapsack.
Okay, money. What else?
4 parachutes. Specifically, 2 main parachutes, the kind you wear on your back, and 2 reserve parachutes, the front ones.
4. Why 4? Was he planning on taking someone with him?
That's what everyone thought initially, and that was probably the point. By asking for 2 full sets, he made it really risky for the authorities to try and sabotage the gear.
Ah, I see. If they gave him a dummy chute?
Exactly. They might be killing a potential hostage he planned to take. It was smart. It basically guaranteed he'd get working equipment. Showed he was thinking ahead, planning for countermeasures.
Clever. So while the folks on the ground are scrambling to get all this together, the plane's just circling.
Yep, for 2 hours, just circling over Puget Sound. The passengers, they had no clue. They were just told there was a minor mechanical difficulty.
2 hours. Must have been tense for the crew. And for Cooper.
Apparently, he was calm, cool as a cucumber. He even made small talk with another flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, who became his main go-between, pointed out landmarks.
Really? Like what?
He said something like, looks like Tacoma down there. And he correctly mentioned that McCord Air Force Base wasn't far from the Seattle-Tacoma airport.
Suggesting he knew the area. Maybe military background.
That's what investigators thought, yeah. Familiarity with the local geography, maybe McCord. Little clues starting to stack up.
So finally, they land in Seattle. The exchange happens.
Right. The FBI had the money ready, $10,000 $20 bills. Unmarked, but they'd microfilmed every single serial number.
Smart. So they could track it if it ever showed up.
That was the plan. The money and the parachutes were brought out to the plane on the mobile stairs by a Northwest manager, Al Lee, who was sold to wear civilian clothes to keep things low-key.
Cooper checks everything out.
Yep. He inspected the cash, looked over the chutes. Only then did he let the 36 passengers and 2 of the flight attendants go.
And then there's that weird story about him trying to tip the crew.
Yeah. Bizarre, right? As people were leaving, he apparently tried to give Tina Mucklow and the other remaining attendants some cash from his own pocket, not the ransom money, like a tip for their trouble.
Seriously?
Seriously. Mucklow politely refused, said it was against company policy. She even apparently joked, asking if she could keep some of the ransom, and he supposedly said yes, but she declined that too.
Wow. The composure is just unreal. Like it's just another business deal.
Exactly. Unnervingly polite, totally in control, right up until the moment he prepared for the real plan.
Okay, so passengers are off, plane's refueled, he's got the money in the chutes. Flight 305 takes off again. Where's he headed now?
The plan, as dictated by Cooper, was to fly south towards Mexico City, with a refueling stop planned in Reno, Nevada. But he gave the pilots very specific instructions on how to fly this leg.
And this is where his expertise really shows up again, right?
Absolutely. This wasn't guesswork. He told them, fly at the minimum possible airspeed without stalling about 100 knots, which is incredibly slow for a 727.
Wow. Yeah, barely flying.
Keep the altitude low, no higher than 10,000 feet. Landing gear must stay down. Cabin must remain unpressurized. And this is the crucial one. Keep the wing flaps deployed at exactly 15 degrees.
15 degrees? Why so specific? I mean, flaps slow you down, but why that exact number? Wouldn't that make it harder to fly? Riskier?
You'd think so, but that's the tell. That 15-degree flap setting on a Boeing 727 is a very specific operational detail. It allows the plane to fly at that super slow 100-knot speed safely, staying just above the stall speed, but providing enough lift.
So it proves he really knew this specific plane, not just general aviation knowledge.
Precisely. It suggested he had technical knowledge, maybe as a pilot, maybe an engineer, specific to the 727. It wasn't just a random number.
And the 727 itself, that wasn't a random choice either, was it? That plane had a unique feature.
Exactly. The key was the aft air stair. It's that staircase under the tail on the 727.
No, that folds down.
Right. Most planes don't have that, or didn't then. The 727 had it so it could operate at smaller airports without jet bridges. And crucially, that stair could be lowered while the plane was in flight.
Was that common knowledge?
Not to the public, no. It was kind of an open secret among pilots, airline staff, maybe some military folks. The crew actually tried to tell Cooper it couldn't be done in flight, probably hoping to stall him.
What did she say?
He basically just said, yes, it can, or told them he'd lowered it himself once they were airborne. He knew.
Yeah.
No bluffing him.
And the design of the plane helped too, with the engines.
Yeah, the 727 has 3 engines, all mounted on the rear fuselage near the tail. So when that aft stair is down, the structure of the tail actually creates a sort of windbreak. It shields someone standing there from the direct engine blast and some of the wind force.
Making it survivable to jump from, or at least more survivable.
More survivable, yeah. Not exactly a walk in the park, but possible. It created this little, relatively calmer pocket back there, perfect for an exit.
Some theories suggest he might have even known about classified uses for this.
There's speculation, yeah.
Please.
The FBI considered that maybe he knew the CIA had supposedly used 727s for covert drops of agents or supplies in Southeast Asia. If true, that's knowledge only a very small select group, likely military intelligence or special ops, would have had in 1971.
Okay, so he knows how to fly the plane, he knows how to get out, but he needs to manage the money. He didn't get the knapsack he asked for, right?
Correct. The money came in a standard heavy cloth bank bag, not ideal for jumping out of a plane with, so he had to improvise.
How?
Tina Mucklow, the flight attendant, saw him doing something with one of the reserve parachutes. He apparently took out a pocket knife and started cutting away the actual canopy, the silk part.
Why would he do that?
The thinking is he was repurposing the empty container, the pack and harness part of the reserve chute, maybe using it as a makeshift bag to hold the muddy bundles, using the straps or webbing.
Resourceful, adapting on the fly.
Totally. Shows he could think under pressure. Mucklow was the last crew member to see him clearly. She saw him near the air stair controls, tying something around his waist, probably the money bag he'd just fashioned.
And then he told her to go to the cockpit.
Yeah. Told her to go up front, close the cockpit curtain, and stay there. Don't come back.
So the crew is flying blind, basically, just following his instructions.
Exactly. Maintaining that slow speed, low altitude. Then, around 8 p.m., a warning light flickers on in the cockpit.
What did it mean?
It indicated the aft air stair had been opened. At the same time, the crew felt their ears popped. The cabin pressure suddenly dropped, confirmed the back door was open.
And the jump itself, when did that happen?
Just a few minutes later. Around 8:13 p.m., the pilots felt a sudden, noticeable upward bump or pitch in the tail section. It was distinct enough they had to correct for it.
That was him jumping.
That's the strong assumption. Later FBI tests, dropping a 200-pound weight from a 727 under similar conditions, replicated that exact tail movement. It pinpointed the likely jump time and location somewhere over southwestern Washington state, probably near the town of Ariel.
But wait, weren't there fighter jets following the plane? Did they see anything?
There were. 2 F-106 interceptors and a T-33 trainer jet were scrambled to shadow Flight 305. But because the 727 was flying so incredibly slowly, the much faster jets had to fly in wide S patterns just to stay behind it without overtaking it.
Wow, so they weren't constantly watching the tail.
Right, and Cooper jumped into impossible conditions. It was a moonless night, heavy cloud cover, pouring rain, pitch black, zero ground visibility. The jets saw nothing. No parachute, no figure, no heat signature, no radar contact.
It vanished.
Completely. Into the storm and the darkness. A perfect exit.
Okay, so the plane eventually lands in Reno, Nevada. Stair still down, Cooper gone. What happens then?
Well, the FBI immediately descends on the aircraft. The hunt is on for any tiny scrap of evidence he might have left behind. Anything to identify this guy.
What did they find?
Surprisingly little, considered. But what they did find became crucial. There was his black clip-on necktie left on his seat.
The tie. Okay, that sounds promising.
Yeah. Also, a mother-of-pearl tie clip. Yeah. 2 of the 4 parachutes, the ones he didn't use.
Right.
They found a single strand of hair on the headrest of his seat, 18E. Looked like brown, Caucasian hair, and 8 cigarette butts in the ashtray. Filter-tipped Raleighs.
Okay, wait. A tie, cigarette butts, a hair. In the 70s, maybe not much you can do, but fast forward. That sounds like potential DNA gold right there.
He would absolutely think so.
Yeah.
And that's where things get frustrating, painfully frustrating.
How so?
You know, that single hair. It was apparently mounted on a microscope slide for analysis back then, but somehow, somewhere along the line, maybe around 2002, it just vanished from the evidence logs. It's lost.
You're kidding me. The only potential biological sample directly linking him to the seat? Gone.
Gone. And it gets worse. Those 8 Raleigh cigarette butts, prime source for DNA, right? Saliva on the filters.
Absolutely.
They were destroyed. Apparently, the FBI's Las Vegas office just discarded them years later, maybe as late as 1998, well into the era when DNA testing was becoming standard. Just threw them out.
That's unbelievable. For a case this huge, how does that even happen?
Negligence, bureaucratic error, who knows? But it's a massive blunder.
Yeah.
Lost evidence that could potentially solve the whole thing.
Unbelievable. Okay, so despite losing that key stuff, the search on the ground kicks off immediately, right?
Oh, yeah. Huge effort. FBI, Army troops, Air Force personnel, hundreds of local civilian volunteers.
Okay.
They start scouring the forests where they thought he might have landed. Clark and Cowlitz counties in Washington. Really rugged, dense terrain.
Did they use any special tech?
They threw everything at it. They even got authorization to use an SR-71 Blackbird. You know, the super fast, high-altitude spy plane.
Wow.
Flew it over the suspected flight path, taking super high-resolution photos, hoping to spot maybe a parachute snag in a tree or the money bag, anything.
Did it work?
No. The weather was terrible, visibility was low, and the tree canopy, those huge Douglas firs, just so dense. The photos didn't show anything useful.
And was the search even in the right area initially?
That's another major problem. The FBI's first calculation of the drop zone, based on wind speed and direction estimates, put it near Lake Merwin, kind of close to Mount St. Helens.
Okay.
But those initial wind calculations turned out to be wrong. It took years, but later analysis, incorporating data from another airliner pilot, a guy named Tom Bohan, flying for Continental, who's actually behind Flight 305.
She saw something.
No, but his flight data helped recalculate the wind drift more accurately. It suggested Cooper had been blown much farther east than they first thought. The probable drop zone got shifted significantly over towards the Washougal River watershed area. Much more remote, even more rugged terrain.
So all that initial searching near Lake Merwin
Was likely in the completely wrong place. A massive amount of effort, potentially wasted. Agent Ralph Himmelsbach, who led the case for years, basically admitted that later on.
Man. And then Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980, right near that whole revised area.
Exactly. The FBI now pretty much assumes that any remaining physical evidence out there, the main parachute, most of the money, maybe personal items, his briefcase, if it was in that Washougal zone, it was likely obliterated or buried under tons of ash by the eruption. Another dead end courtesy of Mother Nature.
So where does that leave the official investigation today?
Well, officially, the FBI suspended the active investigation back in 2016. They cited the need to focus resources on, current cases, but they didn't close it entirely. That massive 66-volume case file is preserved. It's history now, but theoretically, if new evidence turned up.
They could reopen it. The mystery lives on, basically fueled by the few clues that didn't get lost or blown up.
Precisely. And those few clues are really interesting when you look closer.
Okay, let's dive into those clues that survived. The star has to be that clip-on necktie, right? Left right there on the seat.
Absolutely. It's probably the single most important piece of physical evidence we have. And it wasn't anything fancy, just a cheap $1.49 clip-on from JCPenney. Apparently, that specific style was discontinued around 1968.
So the DNA, you mentioned they lost the hair, destroyed the butts. Did they get anything from the tie?
They did eventually. By 2007, using more advanced techniques, the FBI managed to develop a partial DNA profile from samples taken off the tie, probably skin cells from the knot area.
Partial, so not a full identification.
Right, not enough for a definitive match in CODIS or anything. And the FBI themselves admitted they couldn't be 100% certain the DNA even belonged to Cooper himself. It could have come from someone who handled the tie before him, or even during the evidence collection process. Contamination is always a risk with old evidence.
So the DNA was kind of a dead end, too.
Pretty much, from an FBI perspective. But that's where citizen science kind of took over. A group called the Cooper Research Team, or CRT, got permission to do their own analysis.
What did they do differently?
They used electron microscopy. Super high-powered stuff. Instead of looking for DNA, they were looking for microscopic particles trapped in the tie's fibers. Trace evidence.
And they found something.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Hundreds of tiny particles. Some of them were really specific, suggesting Cooper worked in a very particular kind of industrial environment.
Look, what kind of particles?
Get this, particles of pure, unalloyed titanium.
Titanium. Like in airplanes.
Exactly. But pure titanium was extremely rare and specialized back in 1971. It wasn't common stuff. You found it primarily in two places. High-end aerospace manufacturing, think fighter jets, maybe early spacecraft components, or in plants dealing with highly corrosive chemicals where you needed titanium's resistance.
Wow. So that points away from just like a regular disgruntled guy. This suggests specialized industry, maybe even defense contracting or something.
That's the implication. He likely had access to or worked in a pretty high-tech field for the time. They also found particles of cerium and strontium sulfide.
What are those used for?
Cerium was used in things like high-end metal alloys. And interestingly, it was used by Boeing during their supersonic transport, the SST project, their rival to the Concorde, which was being developed right around that time, and strontium sulfide. That was used in manufacturing cathode ray tubes, like for early computer monitors or oscilloscopes. And wouldn't you know it, companies like Teledyne and Tektronix, big players in that field, had major facilities right there near Portland, Oregon, where Cooper boarded the flight.
So the tie itself is like a microscopic resume pointing towards aerospace or high-tech electronics in the Pacific Northwest.
It really seems that way. It's incredibly specific trace evidence.
Okay, what about the other big piece of evidence, the money? Did any of that ever turn up?
Yes, but almost a decade later, and in a way that just created more questions. In February 1980, this 8-year-old kid, Brian Ingram, was digging a fire pit on a sandy stretch of the Columbia Riverbank called Tina Bar. It's about 20 miles southwest of that revised Washougal drop zone.
And he found
3 bundles of $20 bills, badly decayed, falling apart, but bundled together. totaled about $5,800.
And the serial numbers matched?
Bingo. They checked them against the FBI's microfilm list from 1971. It was definitely part of Cooper's ransom money.
Okay, so that seems to confirm he landed somewhere near the Washougal River and the money eventually washed down into the Columbia.
On the surface, yes. It supported the revised drop zone theory. But the details created a huge contradiction.
What was the problem?
Well, first, the bills were found in bundles, but the rubber bands that presumably held them together were completely gone, disintegrated. Experts said rubber bands exposed to river water would likely rot away within maybe a year or two.
But this was 1980, 9 years later.
Exactly. The bundles shouldn't have still been intact if they'd been floating free since '71. And second, geological analysis of the sand layers at Tina Bar, plus records from Army Corps of Engineers dredging nearby, strongly indicated that the specific spot where the money was found couldn't have had those bills deposited there before 1974.
Wait, so the money showed up at Tina Bar years after the hijacking and years after the rubber bands should have decayed.
Precisely. It suggests the money wasn't just lost in the jump and immediately washed downstream. It had to have been stored or hidden somewhere else for several years before somehow getting into the river and ending up at Tina Bar.
Hidden where? By who? Did Cooper hide it and then lose it? Did someone else find it?
Exactly the questions it raises. And it got even weirder with the most recent discovery, the diatom evidence.
Diatoms, like algae.
Microscopic algae, yeah. Scientists analyzed the tiny diatoms embedded in the fibers of those decayed bills found at Tina Bar. Different types of diatoms bloom at different times of the year. What they found was that the only types of diatoms present on those bills were species that bloom exclusively in the springtime.
But the hijacking was in late November.
Right.
Winter.
Right. So this strongly suggests the money didn't enter the Columbia River system immediately after the November jump. It must have entered the water or the specific environment where these diatoms live only during the spring, potentially months or even years later.
That's huge. It implies the money was kept dry, maybe buried near a seasonal stream, or somehow protected until spring floods washed it out.
That's the theory. It really shifts the narrative. It's not just, did he survive? It's potentially, did he survive, retrieve at least some of the money, hide it, and then somehow lose this portion later?
Mind-boggling. Okay, let's quickly touch on the parachutes. He got 4, used 2. What about the ones left behind? Anything significant there?
Well, the 2 main chutes he took were described as military-style emergency bailout chutes, not the steerable kind sport parachutists use. Again, points maybe towards military training. But the interesting thing was one of the reserve chutes they gave him. It turned out to be a non-functional training chute. The canopy inside was sewn shut, completely unusable for an actual jump.
A dummy chute. So did that mean Cooper was an amateur who didn't notice?
That was the initial thought from some investigators. He wasn't an expert, he took a bad chute, but others pushed back. Cooper seemed so meticulous about everything else. Why wouldn't he check his reserve?
Right. So what's the alternative theory?
The guy who actually packed the chutes, Earl Causey, suggested, and Tina Mucklow's observation supports this, that Cooper likely knew it was unusable or didn't care about the canopy itself. He might have deliberately chosen to take it, perhaps after removing the sewn-up canopy like Mucklow saw him cutting, purely to use the empty container and harness as that improvised money bag.
Ah, so repurposing it again, like with the bank bag.
Exactly. The reserve harness itself wasn't properly rigged to attach to the main chute anyway, lacking the right D-rings. So as a parachute, it was useless to him, but as a container for $200,000. Potentially very useful.
Yeah.
It shows clever adaptation, not necessarily ignorance.
Okay, so let's try to put a profile together based on all this. What did the FBI conclude about the kind of person they were looking for?
Their profile painted a picture of someone intelligent, definitely methodical, cool under pressure, likely familiar with the Seattle area, given his comments about Tacoma and McCord AFB.
Right.
Probably had some aviation or paratrooping experience, given the specific flight instructions and the jump itself. They leaned heavily towards an Air Force veteran, maybe someone stationed locally at some point, mid-40s in age.
What about motive?
Financial desperation seemed likely, given the risk involved. But maybe something more. Remember his comment about having a grudge, but not against the airline.
Yeah, that was cryptic. And the alias, Dan Cooper. Any leads there?
That was interesting, too. Dan Cooper is the name of a fictional French-language Canadian comic book hero, a Royal Canadian Air Force test pilot. The comic wasn't widely known in the U.S. back then.
So maybe a Canadian connection? Or time spent in Europe? Or maybe just a random choice?
Could be any of those.
Mm.
It suggested maybe some international exposure, maybe fluency in French, or just a coincidence, another little puzzle piece.
Okay, the profile is taking shape. But the absolute biggest question hanging over everything, did he survive?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or the $200,000 question, I guess.
What was the FBI's official stance for a long time?
For years, the dominant FBI theory, championed by agents like Larry Carr later on, was no, he did not survive the jump.
And their reasoning was pretty solid, right?
Extremely solid. Think about it. Jumping at 10,000 feet at night into freezing rain and wind around 170 mile an hour, wearing just a business suit and loafers, no helmet, no goggles, parachuting into incredibly dense, rugged forest.
Yeah, sound like a suicide mission.
Carr basically said no experienced skydiver would ever attempt to jump like that. The odds of survival seemed minuscule. Death from exposure, injury on landing, getting tangled in trees, seemed almost certain.
But then came the copycats.
Exactly. That really threw a wrench in the impossible jump theory. In the years right after Cooper, several other hijackers tried similar stunts, jumping from 727s.
That some of them made it?
Several did. Martin McNally, Frederick Hahnemann, Richard LaPointe. They all jumped in conditions that were arguably just as bad, if not worse, and they survived. McNally jumped at almost twice Cooper's airspeed, lost his money immediately, but walked away from the landing.
So if they could survive...
It proved it wasn't impossible. Extremely risky, yes, but survivable. Apparently, yes. He made it theory much more plausible.
I heard even some FBI agents started to think he might have gotten away with it.
Yeah, there was an anonymous senior agent quoted back in 1976 saying he personally believed Cooper slept in his own bed that night. So even within the Bureau, there wasn't total consensus.
Okay, so if survival is possible, let's talk suspects. People who might fit the profile and the evidence. Who's top of the list, usually?
Well, the most famous name linked is Richard McCoy Jr.
The copycat guy.
Right. He pulled off a very similar hijacking just 4 months after Cooper, also from a 727, got $500,000. He was caught pretty quickly. Because the crimes were so similar, many people, including even the FBI agent who later killed McCoy in a shootout after he escaped prison, believed McCoy was Cooper.
But he was officially ruled out.
Yeah. Key differences. McCoy was only 29. Cooper was estimated mid-40s. McCoy had light blue eyes, distinctive protruding ears didn't match the eyewitness descriptions from Flight 305, and crucially, McCoy had a solid alibi for Thanksgiving Eve, 1971. He was having dinner with his family in Utah. He was an imitator, a skilled one, but not the original.
Okay, so who fits better maybe with that specialized knowledge angle? Ted Braden.
Braden's a really compelling suspect for many researchers. He was ex-Special Forces, a Green Beret, and a master parachutist with over 900 jumps. At the time, he was living near Vancouver, Washington, working as a truck driver right near the revised drop zone. And critically, he'd served in MACV-SOC in Vietnam.
MACV-SOC.
Military Assistance Command, Vietnam Studies and Observations Group, super classified special operations unit. They did cross-border reconnaissance, unconventional warfare. These guys absolutely would have known about specialized parachuting techniques, possibly even classified stuff about jumping from different aircraft, maybe even 727s if the CIA rumors were true.
And did he fit the description?
Pretty well. Right age range, similar build, dark complexion, maybe slightly shorter than described, but definitely in the ballpark.
Yeah.
He had the skills and the proximity.
What about the titanium connection? Any suspects linked back to that? Joe Lakich?
Lakich is interesting specifically because of the tie evidence. He was a retired Army major, and around the time of the hijacking, he was working as a production supervisor at a factory in Nashville that made electronic capacitors.
Capacitors, how does that connect?
That kind of high-tech electronics manufacturing, especially back then, could potentially involve processes using rare metals or dealing with corrosive materials requiring specialized containment, maybe involving titanium or the other compounds found on the tie. It fits that industrial profile suggested by the particles.
And he had a potential motive beyond money, something personal.
A very strong potential motive. Just 2 months before the Cooper hijacking, Lakich's own daughter had tragically died as a result of what he apparently considered a bungled hostage negotiation handled by the FBI.
Wow.
So the theory goes, Lakich may have harbored an intense burning grudge specifically against the Bureau. Remember Cooper telling Mucklow, "It's not because I have a grudge against your airlines, it's just because I have a grudge." That fits potentially perfectly with Lakich's situation.
That's chillingly specific. Okay, one more prominent name, Dwayne Weber, the deathbed confession guy.
Right. Dwayne Weber was a World War II Army vet, had a criminal record, died in 1995. His widow, Jo, came forward years later saying that on his deathbed he confessed, "I am Dan Cooper."
Did he fit the description?
Physically, yeah, pretty well. And his widow found some intriguing notes he'd made in the margins of a book about the Cooper case.
But he was ruled out, too.
Yeah, forensically. Fingerprints found on the plane didn't match Weber's. And later, when that partial DNA profile was developed from the tie, it also definitively excluded him. So the confession might have been fantasy or confusion, but it shows how the few bits of hard science they do have can at least eliminate some possibilities. Hashtag TagHoutro, brief and conclusive.
So here we are, over 50 years later. The active investigation is suspended, but D.B. Cooper, he's more famous than ever, isn't he?
Absolutely. He's a folk hero, a pop culture icon. There are CooperCons, fan conventions, bars named after him, references in shows like Twin Peaks. The mystery just refuses to die.
It's that central puzzle, isn't it? We have these incredible scientific clues now. The titanium, the spring diadems on the money hinting at his background, suggesting he survived and hid the cash. But the man himself, still a ghost.
And it's easy to romanticize him. But we should remember it wasn't a truly victimless crime. The stress on that flight crew, especially Tina Mucklow, lasted for decades. And the copycat hijackings he inspired put many other lives at risk.
That's a really important point. And legally speaking, it's not completely over, is it?
Technically, no. Back in 1976, a grand jury in Portland indicted John Doe, also known as Dan Cooper, in absentia. That means the charges, air piracy, Hobbs Act violations, are still pending.
So if someone identified him tomorrow and he was alive,
he could still be arrested and prosecuted. The statute of limitations wouldn't apply because the indictment is already in place. The case remains legally open, just cold, very cold.
It feels like we know so much about how the 15-degree flaps, the aft air stare, the likely jump zone, but almost nothing about the who or the what happened next. We're missing the first and last chapters.
Exactly. What happened in those crucial minutes after he left the plane? Did the chute open? Did he land injured? Did he make it to a road, have help waiting? Or did he perish out there in the woods?
And that missing money. Over $194,000 still unaccounted for. After hearing about the Tina Bar discovery and the diatoms, the thought that maybe, just maybe, the rest of that cash is still out there.
Hidden in some rotting container, buried in the mud of the Washougal River watershed, just waiting for the right flood, the right hiker, the right clue to finally surface after all these years.
That feels like the one thing that could blow this case wide open again, finding the rest of that money.
It really does. Until then, D.B. Cooper remains the ultimate phantom of the Northwest sky.